Hello and welcome to a quick demo of the Umlet MCM tool. It's a small project we wrote in university. And yeah, as you can see, it is on GitHub, it is public, and you can download it here under the tags version 1. And we have here the Linux and the Windows version. And if you download the zip, you can then extract the zip, of course. And in the downloaded folder, there is the Umlet MCM file that you can just execute, and on the Windows it would be the Umletino exe file you can execute. So now let's start with the demo of our tool. This is the initial screen that you see when you open it. Here on the left we have a model configuration list. A model configuration is basically like a project. So you can create multiple projects, and all the projects that you already worked on will appear here. Currently we have none, so this is empty. And we can create a new project, like you can give it a name here. And yeah, you can also create it directly from a UXF file, so that you basically import the Umletino diagram directly here. And as you can see, this is the same diagram that we already saw in Umletino before. So what does it do now? As I mentioned before, we have these kind of properties, right? Like here we have the cost, and with 100, but you can define arbitrary properties here, right? You could give it, for example, you could also give it some tags, and we also support strings. So you can also say we have here tag 1, for example, tag 1 and tag 2, and you also can use, so you can use strings, you can use numbers, and you can use lists which are separated by comma, and those will be parsed into the properties fields here in our tool. But we also keep the Umlet properties of Umlet themselves, right? So we have the background color, for example, is also saved, but under the Umlet properties here. And here at the bottom we have some, I would call it like technical fields. We have the full name, which is basically it's a technical crutch, I guess, because when parsing the name, the name of an element, for example, right here, we have a new line in the title, but in this title there could also theoretically be a comment in between comment that is not shown here as the element name. So basically, yeah, we keep all comments that are in between, and if I remember it correctly, also plus like that's a technical limitation. Also, like the comment directly after the title we keep. So and we display like what we work with, right? When we internally in our tool, when we work with the name, we work with this, and we display it so that you are not confused when you're querying for the name of an element. Yeah, and same goes for the description. You can have a description of an Umlet element. I don't know the syntax currently, but you can look it up. And the full description would be displayed here. So what does our tool now allow us to do? We have here the visualization of the parsed diagram. And while it looks the same, it's we in this tool now we actually have the information, like which two nodes are connected, and we can use this information to work with. So for example, we could execute a query here. Yeah? Let's start with something simple. Let's select let's select all the nodes with the background color, with this background color, with the CCCC FF. And what we also implemented some templates, so you don't need to, because this is a Neo4j database, and the language we're using is called Cypher. But luckily, like to get started, you don't like need to learn a lot of Cypher. You can just use the templates we built in. So for example, select, oh yeah, no, exactly. We have so-called macros, and we try to name them rather intuitively. And if you search for find, for example, you can say find node by name, find duplicate nodes, yeah. But what we want here right now is, for example, find by Umlet property, because e.g. background, yeah, we have basically a template for exactly what we want to do. So all we need to do to this query is just change it to the background color that we are actually interested in, execute the query, and we get back only those nodes. So you might have noticed that when we executed the query, the UI jumped to the response database tab. So maybe let's go over the tabs short for like, yeah, in a short manner. So yeah, the response database is basically just, yeah, we have a query and we have a query result, and the query result is displayed, yeah. And we have basically a second tab that does this, where, like, if you swap between those two tabs, between the response filtered model and response database tab, they look the same. What is the difference now? In a project, we can not only have like one graph, yeah, but we can have multiple graphs, yeah. So let's see how this works. In a project, we can open another. Oh, sorry, no, yeah. This led us back to the main screen, but as you can see now on the main screen, our project is listed now, yeah. So we can import a UXF file, and of course we need to choose a file again. And yeah, maybe I'll take this file because that is basically one half of what we already have. I'll show you in a second what I mean. So yeah, this is the lower diagram, I guess. Yeah, the met for motor, yeah. This is the lower part. And if I import the other fragment, yeah, this is the upper part, right? Yeah, and I can also like delete models. Yeah, I'll show it, and I'll just delete that one right here. And now we have it basically split into two separate diagrams, which can be sometimes handy to work with, right? And if I now would select the nodes by background again, find node by Umlet property background, then yeah, in the response database, we see it. We see the nodes with those colors from both models, but response filtered model only displays the nodes from the model that is currently selected. So you see, if I select different models here, the names change because we filter the whole output onto just the selected model. Yeah, can be nice to work with, right? So I'll delete those two models again because actually I want to show you something else which like really brings out the power of our of the tool. So if we import the fragment again, the combined fragment. So I think this would work, by the way, with separated fragments as well. But yeah, this demo file I think is just a bit better prepared syntactically. So yeah, we have here the fragment again. And what I mentioned before is that we have costs here, right? So we have every node has a cost. And some of the costs are -1. -1 node cost is just like this is a concrete use case, let's say, yeah. It's not like written in stone that you need to treat it like this. It's just, this is an example use case we built in, where we use this convention that -1 means that the cost has not yet been calculated, yeah. And basically what we want to do, what the use case that we implemented as a reference or as an example is that we have the cost on every element, and that every relation has a cost as well, but those costs are multiplied. So if I have a resource here, and the arrow tells me, for example, how often I need the resource. Yeah, so I have one energy source, a fossil energy source that has this greenhouse gas emission, let's say, uh, but I need 25 of those resources, so they get multiplied. Yeah, and that means what we want to do, what we would like to calculate, is the product basically of those two, and the product of those two should be then here in the cost, right? Because if the sawing machine only uses those resources and doesn't use any other resources, then the cost that the sewing machine needs is the product of those two. And if we have then 3 sewing machines, then we need to multiply by 3 again, etc. Yeah. And yeah, this calculation, like, so basically the goal is to get the greenhouse gas calculation for a material that we produce by the process that we have modeled here. And for this concrete scenario, just to showcase like how our tool works, we built in an example, and I think it's called sum. Yeah, it's the sum up all costs macro, which is a bit more complex. But the neat thing is, like, yeah, you don't, if you that's the neat thing about the macros. That's why we built in the macros, that you can basically write it once and then just build in a macro. Currently, it is not supported to save macros on your own, so you would need to add it in the code. But yeah, you can add macros to the tool that if you're interested. And when you then execute the query, we saw, okay, the query was executed, and this is now a query that updated the model itself. So the response field, the model, and the response database do not look like really useful because there wasn't anything, there weren't any nodes, any relations returned. But if we look at the responses table, we see quite a different picture, because yeah, basically what was returned was a table. That's why it couldn't be displayed as a graph. And yeah, we saw that 6 nodes have been updated and a few other data. And if you execute the query again, we see that no nodes have been updated, yeah, because all the costs have been calculated. Yeah, and basically the same data that we have here stable could also be displayed as JSON if that is more your style or more your use case that you need. And if you have multiple responses here, we would have multiple lines, and here you have multiple JSONs, and you could just scroll and then copy paste it. And yeah, so let's look at the graph again. I'll delete this so that we have a bigger area. Yeah, so if we now look at the nodes, we see, okay, no, we don't see it here. Oh yeah, because I think it hasn't been reloaded here, because we need to find, let's find all nodes. All nodes, get all nodes. Sorry, this is called get all nodes. If we get it again, yes, now we have it. So that is something important to keep in mind, that when you query or when you do a query that modifies the graph, that you need to execute a query again to get the result if you want to see basically what the modification cost. Yeah. And now we see we have like here a cost of 80,000, which is you can do the math yourself. Just yeah, all those nodes multiplied by the costs of those edges, and yeah, propagate it down, which I think is really nice. That you can do this kind of calculations in our tool. Yeah, maybe you also noticed that we have here now a version, that because our tool does basically automatic versioning. Our tool automatically saves everything we changed, and I'm not sure if the modification of the that we from the query that we just executed is already saved. So I'm just trying to be extra sure and save it here. And now we see we have version 1.0.7. Basically, the versioning just always it's just a counter, yeah. So it just counts up. So if we would reach 10, I think we have version 1.1.0. Yeah. Yeah. And with versioning also, of course, comes the question, what changed between versions, right? So we also have a version diff that you can see here. And like if we look like in the initial version, if you remember, we had the same fragment, right? Initially we imported the same fragment than we have right now, but without the calculations already done. So let's compare those two and see what we can figure out. Demo, okay. We changed. Yeah, that is a good. I wouldn't have like remembered that. We changed the title. And okay, and therefore that is maybe a technical detail and that could be improved, because the title of the configuration changed. The file name, so the configuration data itself is stored in a different file, and that's why we don't see it on a line by line level, but rather on a file level. And actually, as I see it right now, this affects basically everything. This affects also the other files, because now that we have a different project, all the files changed and we don't see it side by side. So this is definitely something that could be improved in the tool in the future. But to show you the benefits of of the version diff, I will just compare the two versions that are actually comparable better. So the version 1.0.6 was before the execution of the update statement, and the version 1.0.7 was after it. And I just realized that I added them in a confusing way. So you always need to compare the newer one to the older one. For me personally, to make sense. So basically, and what we see here now is rather beautifully that just the values changed, right? Everything is the same, but the value of -1, which we said was convention for not having been calculated, was replaced by the value that was calculated for it, and here as well, right? So we see, we can even like verify that nothing else was touched and that our query did what it was supposed to do, right? Yeah, so we had opening a configuration, which I accidentally clicked before, right? Saving a configuration, it just creates a new version, and you always need to do that when you execute a query, because then we don't save automatically. And we had importing a UXF file, and yeah, what you also could do is update from UXF file. So there's a slight difference between import and update. Updating means overriding an existing model, while importing means creating a new model. Yeah. So basically, if I say, oh, I have the changes of that the query did to my model, so the calculations, yeah, I kind of want to undo them. I mean, of course, I could check out an older version, but for sake of demonstration, let's say I want to revert them. So I could import this fragment again and say update. So let's see. Oh yeah, it already worked. I'm gonna just save it again. Oh yeah. There we have a slight bug that we don't see. Sometimes we don't see the newest version. Sometimes a version is created and you don't immediately see it. But basically, yeah, we can just do the diffing again to see what happened. So if you compare, so I think the invisible one and this one should be the same. Oh, okay, yeah, we have the same issue as before. That the file names, oops, that the file names changed and we don't see the differences line by line. So I think it will be, oh no, okay, with this one it works. So basically, yeah, we see it now. We have, as I said before, we have new compared to old, and now we see, okay, the new one has -1 again, where the old one had numbers. So replacing the model worked. I'm not quite sure what happened to version 1.0.8, to be honest. Why did the file names changed? That would also be interesting to look in. So yeah, so we had open configuration, save configuration, update, import. Yeah, export, I think it's rather self-explanatory. You can just basically export everything we worked on here. Again, I think that's going to be rather boring because we still have the -1 values. So let's execute the sum up all costs macro again. And obviously get all nodes again. And yeah, now we have the cost again. By the way, if you want a list of all macros that exist, you can you can use Control Space, and then the drop down menu gets displayed without any filter, and then you can scroll through and take a look at all the macros that currently exist, so that no, you don't overlook a macro that is useful for a use case that you might have. Yeah. So yeah, exactly. We did the calculation again. I'm gonna save the configuration, and now we are at version 1.1.0. And if we export this to a UXF, you can save it here, demo MCM, and I'll just import it again into Umletino to demonstrate that it actually works. So we have here the full, the calculated cost of 80,000, and here the cost of 335. Like, don't be surprised. Our tool to track the nodes, basically, it automatically generates and saves IDs and model IDs in every node. So it would be wise to not use name ID and model ID for yourself, except you actually want to like use it for exactly this purpose. So ID to identify a node and the model ID to identify a model. So basically all the nodes of this model have the same model ID, also of this upper subgraph have the same model ID, and those down there have the same model ID. So yeah, you could theoretically just use model IDs or like give your graphs model IDs and then tell our tool basically what belongs into which model. So yeah, that was the export. You can also export it to a CSV file. I'm not going to show that now. It's just going to be in CSV a list of all nodes and of all connections. And then we have the same, basically, the export we don't only have for the full model, but we also have it not only for the full configuration, I'm sorry, we have the configuration operations up here and the model operations down there. So you can also just export a single model. As this model contains basically everything, or like we only have one model here, this is going to be the same as this. And yeah, and the last thing I'm going to show is basically you could also, let's import AUXF file again, because I showed you already that we have like two fragments, right? So this is fragment 1, and this is fragment 2. And yeah, let's say, okay, I've worked with them. Wait, oh, yeah, sorry, this is the response database. This doesn't get updated, as I said. You need to execute a query. So if you have the model graph, then you see actually what's going on, what the model is. And if I would say, oh yeah, it was nice having them separate, but I'd actually like to have them in one model again, then you can combine them. Just select the models you want to combine. You can even give them a new name. Combined. Oops. And you can also name the versions, right? Like the version number you saw up there can also be replaced by a custom name if you use this menu. So let's say combine frag 1 and 2. And then those two are in the combined version. And we can, okay, there we have a, delete this model. Oh, yeah, I think this might be a bug where we get an error message, but actually it works. Like now I deleted the second one and both are gone. So it did work, right? But there is an erroneous error message. So the error message shouldn't be there because there wasn't actually a problem. This is also something that could be fixed. Because yeah, our tool was developed for a university project, and while we did a final demo, it has never been used in production, and this means that a lot of like little things, as you just experienced, can be in the tool and can have kind of gone like unrecognized. So yeah, I advise you to be mindful of that when you want to like offer this tool to someone else or someone who is like not as technically versatile, let's say. Yeah, I think that's it. Thanks for watching, and I hope you can use our tool for something that helps you. Bye.